Hey everybody, and on today's vlog, we are going to be playing Codermarz by Coder Bunnyz LLC. So let's get coding.
It's the year 2090. Your spaceship has just landed on Mars. Captain Capability, Captain Courage, Captain Creativity, and Captain Compassion need to be able to train themselves on Mars to collect supplies in order to help them settle. But here's the twist. To help the astronaut survive, you are the mastermind. Your astronaut needs to collect all the supplies and essentials to survive on Mars, and you can use your predictive instincts to do so. The idea is easy. Play a board game, help the astronauts explore Mars, visit various places, collect necessary supplies, and a lot more, all in a fun, exciting Martian adventure. Yes, prepare to settle on Mars.
Hey sir, how's it going?
I'm well.
So what are we going to be playing today?
Today we are going to be playing Codermarz, a coding game for Mars explorers. This is sort of an indie published game by a company called Coder Bunnyz LLC, who sent us this copy to review on the channel. Thank you. This is a coding and Mars exploration game for 2 to 4 players. And sort of the way that it works is we are going to be exploring Mars, looking for various resources. Now, normally I would not show you these, but because I want you to see what they look like, I'll go ahead and show them to you. So these are the various resources that we are looking to collect. And throughout the planet, there are different resources scattered. One of the neat things about this game is that there's a huge variability on the setup. So you can kind of pick and choose how many of these types of tokens you would like to play with. For this game, we're going to be playing with 3 basic resources. So that's H2O, O2, and food. And then there's an additional kind of token, this volcano here. So to set up the game, we have placed one of each type of token per player into the play area. And there's a couple different ways you can do this. You can either place them randomly, or they do provide location cards where you can place things in specific locations on the board. However, no matter how things are placed on the board, players don't know what they are until you actually explore the space containing the object. So when we turn the camera off and get ready to start this game, I will flip all these back over, I'll shuffle them back up, and we'll randomly redistribute them on the board. So the way that the game works is that the first player to collect the necessary resources and make it to their base wins the game. So in this game, we're going to be playing, like I said, with the 3 different resources. So the first person to collect all 3 of their resources and get to their home base will win the game. So I'm the blue player. I start over here facing towards my home base, which is over here. Nick is going to be the pink player. He starts facing this direction where his home base is over here. And then we are going to be playing cards to try to move around on Mars, collect these resources, and get to our home base. Whichever player can do that first wins the game. So it is, at its heart, a coding game. And the way to translate that into sort of like board game terms is that it's a program movement game. So this is a very educational game. They're really trying to gamify coding as it relates to, like computer coding. So this is an attempt to sort of gamify that idea. And the way that it's going to work in ways that would relate to board game terminology that you may be familiar with is that it's going to be a lot of program movement. And so the way that that's facilitated are in these code cards. There are 2 decks of code cards. There are function cards, and then there are these explore cards. What's going to happen at the start of a player's turn is they're going to roll this dice, and it has the numbers 1, 2, and 3 repeated twice. So you roll this dice here, and it gives you a value. You are going to draw that number of cards in any combination from your 2 different decks of cards, but you can only draw at most 1 of these. So when I rolled a 1 here, I could draw one function card, or I could draw one regular Explorer card. Let's pretend that I rolled a 3 though. In this case here, I could draw 3 of these cards here, or 1 of these cards and 2 of these cards. What's going to happen after I roll the dice and decide which cards to draw is I'll draw the cards into my hand, and then I will figure out in which order I want to play them. So if, for example, I rolled a 3 and I had these 3 cards in hand, I could play them in any order I want to, and they're going to allow me to move my little astronaut around the game board. Now remember, all these tokens would be face down. I wouldn't know what any of them were. So let's pretend that I decided to play this first. Now the orientation of the card is important, as is the orientation of your astronaut. So in this case here, I would be moving 1 space forward based on the astronaut's point of view. So he would move here. And then I could move 2 spaces in any direction. And once you start moving in a direction, you have to keep going that way. So I could, if I wanted to, move here, pick up or look at this token here, and then move here. And then finally, I would play my last card and move here. And that would be my turn. So when you are playing the Explore cards, it's fairly simple. You just draw as many Explore cards as the roll of the dice would allow. You play them in whatever order you want to. You move your little astronaut around, picking up any resources that you might pick up on the way. If, however, you decided to, instead of drawing 3 of the regular Explore cards, if I would have decided to draw, let me find it one I want to talk about here. So let's say that I had decided to draw 2 cards from my Explore deck and 1 card from my my function deck. So again, this would all be blind draw, but let's say that I draw these 2 and then I draw this one here. Now, the Explore cards work just as I've just described, but the function cards, when you draw a function card, you are going to create a function that will stick with you either until it's replaced or through the end of the game. And the way that the function cards work is sort of the basics of programming. If we were actually going to like program code on a computer system, right? And that's sort of the aim of this game, is to teach coding skills, the basics of coding skills. So sort of introducing people to the general concepts behind coding and that kind of thing. So they have this sort of coding text here, which is it's gonna give you some kind of program to execute if you can. So for example, this one says, while your right is not blocked, you explore 1 step to the right. So from my astronaut's perspective again, if I had this function card in play, it would force me to move right at some point during my turn, if I could. So if I had already played out all of my Explore cards and I just had this card left, then because I do have a space open to my right, I would have to move right. And there's a bunch of different kinds of these cards in the deck. There are some that are pretty simple like that, where if you can move a certain direction, you must. There are other ones that say, like if there is a resource in a certain direction, pick it up, right? Or there are other ones that are a little bit more complicated, where you draw 1 of these cards and then you have to draw 2 of these cards and sort of assign them to this card. And the whole point of the green cards is to sort of establish functions that will transpire on your turn, which will force you or allow you, depending on how you look at it, to carry out certain movements every turn. And over the course of the game, it is supposed to sort of acclimate players to the ideas and principles of computer coding. So what happens is, on your turn, you roll the dice, you draw that number of cards, you play the cards in order to move your astronaut around Mars. When you encounter a token, you secretly reveal it to yourself. You get to look at it, but you don't show anybody else. If it's a resource that you don't have yet, you take it into your supply, and the goal is to try to get all of the resources and get to your home base before the other players. Now, there are also some volcano tokens. There's one volcano per player. And again, this is sort of one of those things that you can play with if you choose to, but you don't have to. So if you don't want to play with the volcanoes, you don't have to. But we're going to go ahead and play with them in this game. The volcanoes are another tile that would be played face down. And when you step onto that, you have to look at it yourself. And again, you don't reveal it to anybody else, but I would look at it myself and I'd say, crap, it's a volcano. So I blow up. When I blow up, I have to return to the start. I get to keep any resources I've already gotten to bank, that kind of thing, but I have to go back to the start and sort of start over from the start place, trying to gain whatever resources I still needed to win the game and then make it back to my home base. Now, at the start of the game, if you want to, you can have these 3 cards in play, and these are some sort of like extra cards that let you do special abilities throughout the game. These are all one-time use cards, so you get to use them one time throughout the game, and once you use them, that's it. One of them is a diffuse card. So if you step onto a volcano and you're playing with the diffuse card you haven't already expended, you can expend the diffuse card to just move the volcano somewhere else. And you get to strategically choose where to place the volcano. So when you do that, you can sort of like throw it towards another player and hope that they will end up stepping onto the volcano. However, there are also peek cards, which let players peek at different tokens. So if you throw a volcano near somebody else, they could peek and say, oh, that's a volcano. I'm going to try really hard to avoid that volcano. But because of the program movement nature of the game, there are times when you can't. And then finally...
You just eat it.
Yeah, sometimes you just eat it. And then finally, there's also a shuffle card, which lets you exchange 2 tokens on the board. So if you think you might step on a volcano that's near you, you could move it somewhere else and exchange it with a token that's somewhere else on the board. So there are a few cards to sort of help you mitigate things that might happen. Now, the way that it works, like I said, is that players take turns until one player has accumulated all their resources and makes it back to their home base. The first player to do that wins the game. So yeah, that's Codermarz in a nutshell. There's a lot in this game that you can sort of add or subtract from the game depending on how much
complexity you want.
Yeah, how much complexity you really want. For example, they do a nice job laying out sort of like an introductory path in the rule book. So they say, like, to start with, don't even bother with these. Like, just put them back in the box your first game. Don't bother with them. Just worry about these cards. And then, like, later they introduce these cards and tell you a little bit more about how to use them, that kind of stuff. They have more tokens than we're playing with right now, more types of tokens, and you can play with additional types of tokens if you want. You can add or remove the volcanoes or just different things like that. So there's a lot of variability in the player's hands about how complex a game they would really like to make this. We are going to play sort of the mid to heavy version of the game. We're playing with most of the tokens in play. We're playing with most of the cards in play. And we will be playing with most of the mechanics that you can possibly play with in play as well. That being said, it's still not like a terribly heavy game, and the box time, there is no box time, excuse me. I would say it's probably going to take us about 35 to 40 minutes. Yeah, there's definitely no box time. So 35 to 40 minutes probably to get through a complete game with the majority of the concepts in play.
Well, all right. Well, let's get into it and play some Codermarz. All right. We'll see you guys in a second. Toodles. Hello, Sarah. So it seems like you're doing fairly well in our game so far.
I'd say so. I have 3 resources at my home base.
Yes.
We are only playing with 3 different kinds of resources this game.
Yes.
So by a process of elimination, you can tell that I have collected all the resources I need.
Oh, yes.
And now I just have to get home. And I'm actually pretty close. So,
Oh, yes. Right there.
Yeah. You've only collected one resource.
Yes.
And yeah. So we shall see.
We shall.
Bad, terrible things could happen to me.
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah.
But
yeah.
it seems
Looks pretty clear.
unlikely. So what do you think so far?
Well, it's kind of a thing that's kind of frustrating within the game is you roll the die and then you pick the cards. And basically it's a programmed moving game, so the cards are basically telling you where you move to. And without my own control, I could just be like kind of like fizzing out on one side where I'm like, you know.
It looked like you were doing the box step earlier. You were just kind of like going left and then straight and then right and then forward and not really going anywhere.
Yeah, and it seemed like for you it just like was flowing very well and very fast.
I think to do well with this game, you have to kind of sort of just like go with what happens to you.
Yeah, definitely.
You roll the dice in order to tell you how many cards to draw, and then you have a choice between different types of cards to draw.
Do you get one card of that? Or
Yeah, you can get at most you can get one of these cards, and these are a little bit more random, but they might be more powerful too.
Yeah.
So you're sort of playing the sort of randomness here. If you can make that work to your advantage, you're probably going to get further than if you would have just drawn one of these cards. But if you can't, it could seriously mess you up.
Yeah.
So you can at most draw one of these cards, and then you can draw as many of these cards as you need to reach your level. You have to draw the full number of cards that you rolled. So if you rolled 2, you have to draw 2 cards. Now, you don't have to draw one of these if you don't want to, but you could draw one and then one of these, or you could just draw 2 of these. But you do have to draw and then execute both of those cards.
Yep.
You can execute them in whatever order you want. So again, that gives you some sort of leeway with how to move. And if you can kind of look at the map and say, I'd really like to make it in this direction, maybe you have to kind of go like sort of a long way to get there. But I feel like even though it might feel a little random, if you are flexible, you can make the cards work in your favor most of the time.
Yeah, because sometimes it's just frustrating to watch yourself like kind of do the box step while the other player seems like they're doing a better job at moving around on the board and getting what they need.
I think another reason that it's not as frustrating as it could be to move around in this game is that if you look at the board, each of these dots are connected by like lines. And you have to move in a straight line, but you can move in between any 2 dots. So from here, I can go here, 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 or here, or here. And if this wasn't another player's start space, I could even go this direction. So right now, I have 8 different points that I could move to. And in most cases, you'd have like 9 different points that you could move to. Just based on how your card tells you that you have to move.
Yeah.
So I think having the connections be so plentiful really helps with some of those sort of dead movements where you're like, well, I have to go right, even though I don't really want to go right. Okay, that's fine. Maybe next time I get to move left twice, and that's really what I wanted to do. Having so many of these connections on the board, I think really undercuts what could be a very bitter taste in the mouth if you just constantly had to go in directions you really didn't want to.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, we're going to continue playing and drawing and rolling, and we'll see if I can somehow make a miraculous comeback or if Sarah kind of whiffs. But I don't know. I think you're one pretty close to home, and you already have all 3.
I still have my shuffle and diffuse cards available to me.
And
I have a pretty good idea of which ones are the volcanoes. So I'm thinking that maybe I will shuffle the volcano tokens around a little bit to just continue to throw you off a little bit. Maybe.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Maybe.
All right.
We'll see.
Yeah, sure. All right. Well, we're going to get back into it, and we'll talk to you guys in a bit and see who is the winner and the loser. All right. Toodles. Hello, Sarah.
Hi there.
How is the Coder Queen?
I have coded Mars.
Yes.
And
You've coded the heck out of it.
So I successfully found and brought back to my headquarters the 3 resources I needed to win the game, and then I myself made it back to headquarters before Nick.
Yeah.
Nick only found one of the resources that he needed, and then he stepped on a volcano and got sent home.
Yeah, that was not fun. I was like, oh no.
So, what did you think?
I think this is an educational game, and it is a little rough for hobby gamers probably to tackle and get into.
Yeah, so I would say it's definitely an educational game. On the back of the rule book, it says what you will learn while playing this game. Coding, sequence of steps to solve a problem. Neural network, which is a connection of circular neuron, similar to connections of neurons in the human brain, that is able to learn by process of trial and error. AI prediction, which is deciding the outcome based on previous information and algorithms, and facts about Mars. So they're definitely, I think they've definitely designed this game with education in mind, and probably an attempt to gamify coding, which could be a valuable skill. Now, you're not going to play this game and know how to code, right?
Yeah.
But I think it is a really friendly introduction to some of the sort of concepts of coding. Like, for example, on some of the cards, they introduce like the actual language that you would have to write in if you were going to write code. And this is a way to sort of become familiar with the general syntax of that language, and maybe kind of understand how it might start to work, right? Obviously, this is a very, very surface exploration of coding, but it's going to give you some introduction to various aspects of computer coding.
Indeed.
That being said, I think it is definitely sort of an educational game. It's there are areas where it can be fun, but it's also it could also use a little bit of polish. I think the game is self-published, and I think if they work with a publisher, they could probably sort of clean up and jazz up some of the elements of the game, and it would sort of bring it more into the hobby market, as opposed to sort of like the self-published.
Self-published, or even the educational, part of it all.
Yeah. And I really think the core of the game can be sort of polished into a real gem of a hobby game without losing its identity. I really think that that's possible for this game. And I do think that for people who like program movement, whether it's polished or not, this is a fun game as long as you're willing to sort of stumble through the rulebook a little bit. The rulebook is a little poorly laid out. It could be a lot cleaner, a lot better organized, a lot more succinct, but it's easy enough to understand if you're willing to take the time to sort of ferret out all of the little pieces of information here and there. I have read much worse rule books than the one in this game. So if you're willing to be a little patient and kind of ferret out the information in the rule book, you will be able to learn this game. You'll be able to play this game, and it would be my recommendation to play it in the order in which it's described in the rule book. They've got several sort of like, for your first game, do this. For your next game, add this. For your next game, add this, kind of thing. And I would recommend doing that. The games are pretty quick, so it doesn't take long for you to sort of ramp up to like a full experience of the game. But it gives you a nice, gentle introduction to some of the more alien concepts in the game, like some of the actual computer coding that you'll be using in the game. So they lay that out nicely in the rulebook in a way that's like friendly to players who have never laid eyes on any kind of code. So I would recommend doing that. And if you're gonna try this one, just just kind of ease into it the way that they introduce it.
And no, also, this is just like, again, an educational game. Educational games and hobby games have their differences and the feel, like Sarah was saying, go through step by step. Like, hey, if this is the first game. It's not like when hobby games are like, this is the easy mode. It's like, well, I'm an experienced hobby player, so I'm going to skip to the other.
I wouldn't do that with this one. Even if you feel like you're experienced enough to sort of skip ahead to the more advanced games, you don't feel like you need the beginner games or whatever. I wouldn't necessarily do that with this particular game if you're not also familiar with coding, because the introductory games in this don't introduce you just to the game concept, but also to coding concepts. Yeah. And if those are not familiar to you, the introductory games laid out in the rulebook are going to be really, really helpful for you to just kind of become familiar with these concepts of coding and how they function in general, as well as in the game.
Yes.
I think they did a nice job with the production of the game. These are screen printed... what are these called? Astronaut meeples.
Yep.
And they're screen printed on both sides, which I love. All of the components are decent materials. We've got like thick cardboard pieces. The cards are a little thin, but decent quality. The only thing about the production of the game that I didn't think was great are these cards here. And this one is a bit of a catch-22 for the game, because they are trying to lay out the coding language as you would see it if you were really coding. And that's not going to be very attractive no matter what you do, right? But these cards, to me, are not as visibly pleasing, and they also don't seem to like necessarily fit with the rest of the theming of the game. The rest of the theming of the game is kind of like soft, and it's got this sort of like, I don't know, Martian sort of feel to it, and these just feel very cold and computer based, right? Which is exactly what they are, because it's this code. Aside from that, everything else looks really good. They have the cards the extra cards that you play with. These have some nice, like, sort of graphic design and artwork to them.
And if that same, thing could be just applied to
if they would carry this sort of art style through the rest of the game, I think they could achieve a sort of a more cohesive feel to the entire thing, and maybe just sort of make it look a little bit more attractive, just because computer code is not an attractive thing, right? Yeah. And I understand they're trying to teach you this code, and it's important to see how it would actually look for that purpose, but I feel like it sort of lends to that sort of unpolished feel of the game, or that indie sort of feel to the game.
Indeed.
But other than that, there's plenty of everything. Everything's in like nice condition and quality. And I think that if you like computer coding, if you want to learn sort of a basic introduction to computer coding, and how it functions and what it looks like and stuff like that, this is a great game for that. I think if you homeschool, or if you do any kind of like schooling supplementation with games at home kind of thing, it would be great to sort of introduce children to some of the concepts I talked about, like the neural networks and that kind of stuff. It would be good for that. And if you like program movement and you don't mind a little bit of randomness to your program movement, then this one is really fun in that respect.
All right. Well, this was our vlog of Codermarz by Coder Bunnyz LLC. Coder Bunnyz LLC. So yeah. We hope you all enjoyed it, and I think it's on Amazon, so you can check it out there if you want, and we will talk to you guys later. Toodles!